Well, we're at day 3 in John chapter 7, 32 to 39. And as you're reading this, it might seem like there's some details and it's like, how does this all work together? And I would love, Carmen, for you to share some of the background of the Feast of Booths and how what Jesus says here at the very end just ties so beautifully into those rich details.
Yeah, I've just kind of touched on it, and I know, ladies, there's something so deep and rich about the feast, and a lot of what we see in John kind of center around the feast. Even back when Jesus healed the invalid, that was the Sabbath, and so that would be considered a Sabbath feast. And then last week was that bread of life took place over the Passover feast. So now we're to which feast?
The Feast of Booths.
Yes, the Feast of Booths.
So tell us a little about the Feast of Booths.
Well, I'm not an expert at this. Okay?
You've read more than we probably have, though.
But there is this idea of Jesus coming, or not Jesus coming, but it's a celebration of the fall harvest. So they are coming together to celebrate, and all the men, it's one of those 3 feasts where all the men would come to Jerusalem and they would celebrate, and they would build these little booths or tabernacles, which there is, as you mentioned, there's this idea of the wilderness and living in this kind of a booth. So there's remembering that piece, but there's also just bringing in like branches of the grapes and the olives from the harvest, and that's what they would use to make their little temporary camping shelters.
It's like a harvest celebration.
Definitely a harvest celebration. At the same time, it appears that they're asking God for water too. This would be their dry season versus early spring would be their wet season. So we're talking about the Middle East here. And
this makes sense for an agrarian society where the harvest depends on water.
Absolutely. So anyway, there is, every day of the feast, there is this water ceremony that takes place. And apparently on the last day of the feast, they would do the ceremony 7 times. So,
which is the number of perfection or completeness.
It is. And so here we see verse 37, on the last day of the feast, the great day. So it's interesting that they call it the great day. Jesus stood up and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." So isn't that beautiful how it all parallels together, and that Jesus really is, he's like the completion of the feast, the perfect completion of the feast.
Yeah, I think the book of Hebrews kind of points to this a lot, where the Old Testament laws and the rituals and the ceremonies and the feasts were all given as a foreshadowing of Christ, to kind of give them a physical object lesson to cling to and understand, so that when Jesus would come, the spiritual truths that he would reveal, they would be able to grasp. And I just love how that all ties in here.
Oh, I do too, Ashrita. That was so beautifully said as well. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge of biblical feasts.
Yeah, if you have more to add to that, we would love to hear from you. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this is deep and rich.
Yeah, let us know.